SHiNE Nation. I am Erin, and I am the Community Engagement Director for our SHiNE Online community, and I have a treat for you today. We will be hearing from a special member of our community, Kim Gustin, who is a SHiNE Online member from Tulsa, Oklahoma. She is also a licensed professional counselor who has been studying and practicing in the helping field for 30 years. And today she is going to share her presentation called A Therapist's Guide to Letting Your Soul Shine, to help us explore practices that SHiNE spotlights, such as love, courage, power, and joy. You are going to walk away with some new language, insights, strategies, and resources to cultivate these practices in your everyday life to be better equipped to let your soul shine. Kim, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your insights with us.
Hi, my name is Kim Gustin. I'm a licensed professional counselor who has been working in the mental health field for almost 25 years, working with individuals of all ages in a variety of settings. More importantly to this video, I am a SHiNE member and enthusiast. I joined SHiNE Online in 2020, and in the time since have really come to experience SHiNE as more than fitness. From Kendall, the founder of SHiNE, and all throughout this community, everyone I've interacted with, fellow online members, local instructors, the choreographers, it's clear to me that SHiNE cares about the whole person. And that's exactly why I'm here. They have invited me to spend some time talking about how we can take the tools and strategies that they model and offer us in our workout and apply it to other areas of our life so that we can shine both on and off the dance floor. I'm really excited about the opportunity to partner with SHiNE because I recognize the important role of physical exercise on our mental health. The psychological research is clear. Regular physical exercise is a foundational and essential piece of any good mental health hygiene practice. That's why many of us in the field are often promoting joyful movement in order to encourage people to incorporate this as part of their mental health hygiene. I can think of no other fitness program that fits that descriptor better than SHiNE Dance Fitness. So what does the research indicate? Well, it shows that regular physical exercise benefits us in a variety of ways. It helps improve our circadian rhythms, which leads to improved sleep, and sleep is essential for good physical and mental health. It helps reduce stress hormones in our body. It allows us to release tension. It improves our mood. Some studies even indicate that exercise, physical exercise, is as effective at treating common mental health disorders like anxiety and depression as therapy and medication. And that's certainly not to diminish the value of those tools in caring for our mental health, but more to amplify the possibilities and the potential that we can get from regular physical exercise routine. In addition to mental health benefits, the research indicates cognitive health benefits as well. We know that regular exercise promotes new brain growth. It prevents cognitive decline and memory loss, which are really essential for caring for and protecting our brains as we age. So I hope in hearing just a few of those quick positive outcomes that are associated with regular exercise, it will bolster the commitment and dedication of those of you who are an active part of the SHiNE Dance Fitness community, or really any fitness community. And for those of you who are still struggling to incorporate exercise as a part of your lifestyle, I hope it's a nudge for you to keep on. When we consider the health benefits to our bodies, our minds, our emotions, and our brains, it's clear that it's worth the fight. It's worth struggling for. Besides giving us a a joyful way to care for our bodies and brains, SHiNE also invites us to let our souls shine. And I think there's something really invigorating about that invitation that really connects to many of us and calls to us. I found myself curious about that and what it is that excites us and motivates us about the idea of letting our soul shine. So I want to spend a few minutes here really digging in and considering what it means to let our soul shine and what it takes to let our soul shine. Maybe a great place to start is to really just think about people in our lives that we would ascribe that to. Who are people that come to mind in your life, or maybe within the SHiNE community or the general public sphere, that you think are letting their souls shine? And I'd love to hear who comes to mind in the comments if you want to share. And maybe more importantly, I'd love to hear what it is you think that they are doing or what you think it takes in order for them to let their soul shine. So I came up with a working definition. It's simple of what I think it means to let your soul shine. I think it means to be fully you, to be yourself, and to share that self with the world. When we look at the definition of SHiNE in the dictionary, it's not surprising. What it means is to give out a bright light or to direct that light in order to see something in the dark. And I believe that when we let ourselves shine, we bring a light into someone's darkness. And this gives us a sense of value and purpose. I think it brings beauty and interest through diversity in the world. And I think it answers what it is about that invitation that calls to us. Perhaps you want to let your soul shine because you have something the world needs. When we let our souls shine, we are thriving. And this is important because we can't thrive when we are fighting to survive. If our basic psychological and physiological needs aren't being met, then we can't really be concerned with letting our soul shine. And this is certainly not to shame anyone who might find themselves in survival mode now. In fact, I think being in survival mode is a normal part of the human experience, and we're all going to find ourselves in survival mode several times throughout our life, if not throughout the day. Many of us can look back at our childhoods and we can identify that as a time of survival, just trying to make it out alive. Others maybe have experienced loss through death or divorce. Perhaps you've been faced with a serious diagnosis or an unexpected unemployment that extended for an unknown amount of time. All of these situations point to times in our lives when our world gets turned upside down, we're thrown into chaos, and we land in survival mode. And it is our survival instinct that gives us resilience. It's amazing how our bodies are designed to protect us physically and psychologically. And the survival instinct is activated by fear, or at least that's the lived experience. There's a part of us that's scanning our environment, constantly monitoring, looking for any indication of threat or danger. And when it does detect that, it will alert us. And that feeling, that experience is often fear, and it activates our survival mode, our survival instincts, which you often hear referred to as fight or flight. And the reason I wanted to really highlight that process is because I want you to recognize or pay attention as I go throughout this discussion how many times fear comes up in preventing us from letting our soul shine. Fear is the enemy of shining. So, what does it take to let our soul shine? Well, I came up with a list of 5 things that I believe it takes. I generated this list just by really considering the culture and what we do in SHiNE Dance Fitness, as well as what I do in my therapy room as a therapist. I believe it takes courage, love, power, purpose, and joy to let our soul shine. And this is not an exhaustive list, but I do believe it's a core list, an essential list. I think it's in our DNA and it's in the DNA of SHiNE. And so I want us to dig into each one of these. And I think it's helpful to think of these 5 things as capabilities. We possess these things. We can do and be these things. There's potential. Like an example might be like our muscles. We each have muscles. We are born with muscles. We possess them. But what we do with those makes a difference. If we don't use our muscles, they atrophy and become useless. And when we use them, we are able to grow and develop and become stronger, more powerful, more efficient in the use of that muscle. And in that way, I think these 5 things or these 5 capabilities can also be seen or considered as practices. They're things that we can practice. There are skills that we can master, we can hone, we can develop through practicing them. So as we go through this, I want you to think of how you can practice these 5 capabilities in your life to let your soul shine. So the first one we're going to dig into is courage. In order to let your soul shine, it takes courage. And that's because to shine, by its very definition, means to be seen or to stand out. We are going to be putting the real us on display. And that means we're going to attract attention and maybe even sometimes be the center of attention. I suspect, like me, many of you find yourself shrinking at the idea of being the center of attention, that you don't feel comfortable being the focus. And some of you, maybe you do enjoy that and you thrive, but many of us find ourselves a bit reluctant or resistant to be the center of attention. And that's why it takes courage in order to let ourselves shine. I think it's helpful to consider the zebra as an analogy and as a visual in understanding this dynamic of how we often shrink from attention. We all know that zebras are black and white striped, and we know that that offers them a camouflage. But when we take it a bit further and we think about the zebra in its natural habitat, the plains of Africa, maybe that camouflage doesn't make as much sense as we take for granted, because there's not a lot of black and white stripy things in their natural environment. So how does this protect and hide the zebra? Well, it's only in the context of the herd that those stripes become a camouflage and become protective. When a single or an individual zebra is in the context of a group of zebras, it now blends in and can't be distinguished. It can't be singled out. So the predator is unable to identify one zebra in the mass of zebras to target, to attack. And so this is often what's happening or underlying our tendency to want to just blend in with the crowd. We want to just be camouflaged so that we can't be singled out or targeted. So in order to shine, we're going to have to be vulnerable. We're going to be exposed. And I suspect that many of you liked the idea of having courage more than you like the idea of being vulnerable. However, they're 2 sides of the same coin. As Brene Brown author, researcher, and expert in shame and vulnerability, says, vulnerability is our most accurate measure of courage. So if we want to measure how courageous we are, we only need to look at how willing we are to be vulnerable. So what keeps us from vulnerability? Well, just as we saw in the analogy with the zebra, it is fear. It's fear. We want to protect ourselves. So fear of rejection, fear of failure, of ridicule, judgment, humiliation. These are the things that prevent us from being vulnerable and prevent us from shining. So if you'd like to level up in this area, and with each one of these practices, I'm going to give you some resources or some challenges to level up. And I encourage you, rather than trying to tackle all 5, just pick one that you feel like you're ready and able to push yourself, to stretch yourself a bit, and commit to one of these challenges. And so to level up in the area of courage, if you just want to get more information on what it means to be courageous or to be vulnerable, as I mentioned, Brene Brown is the expert in this area, and she has given us a lot of resources to make this information accessible. She has The Call to Courage on Netflix. If you're a reader, she's got several books out there, and you really can't go wrong with any of them. But I would maybe point you to Gifts of Imperfection as a place to start. If you're more of a listener, you can access her lecture series titled The Power of Vulnerability. I know that's available on Audible. So there's some resources for you if you want to get more information. As a personal challenge, I would just encourage you to spend some time to think about and reflect on how you could be more vulnerable. What's one thing that you could do to make yourself more vulnerable? And if that feels too broad or too risky or scary, narrow the focus. What's one environment in which you can practice being vulnerable? Or again, if that's too much, you can narrow down and just think about what's one relationship in which you feel able to practice vulnerability. So let's put a spotlight on the culture at SHiNE Dance Fitness and consider this practice of courage. When have you seen someone at SHiNE being vulnerable or demonstrating courage? I would love to hear in the comment section or read in the comment section. I think it's really very evident in the moments they brand themselves reality fitness. And these are the moments in which they acknowledge that there's been mistakes or flaws or imperfections, and they don't edit out every single one of those mistakes. They don't airbrush or polish it before putting it out there to be seen in the world, or to be used for the benefit of the world. And so that takes vulnerability and courage. Another way we can look at this is by asking, what are some times in which we have felt challenged by SHiNE to show courage? For me, that's any freestyle segment, when they leave a little bit of time in a routine for us to just let ourselves move in whatever way we want to. I become like a deer in headlights, and I feel very vulnerable and exposed. Perhaps for some of you, it's posting those shiny selfies where you snap a picture post-workout, sweaty, hair a mess, and share it on your social media. What are some other times that come to mind that you've been challenged to be courageous? So the second practice is love. In order to let your soul shine, you need love. And in fact, I suspect that love is the light. I put love immediately following courage because I believe that if we're going to be vulnerable, we need to be rooted in love. Love fuels courage by buffering us from vulnerability. It allows us to tolerate vulnerability. Or as the old Bible passage says, love casts out fear, the fear of vulnerability. And we're hearing this echoed more and more amongst relationship experts, that the opposite of love is actually fear. Love can be protective. And in order to really understand this or to see this in action, I think a helpful example is looking at the love of a parent and how the love of a parent protects. Of course, I want to acknowledge that not all parents protect their children. And so if um, that's been your experience, that your parents didn't protect you, I want you to think of this more as the exemplar or the ideal parent, or maybe even just the way we know that the relationship is designed to function between a parent and child. A parent or a primary caregiver becomes the secure base or safe haven that allows the child to go into the world and explore it and explore themselves within the context of that world, so they can discover who they are and who they want to be in the world. And so, in this way, love protects. I think all of us can easily imagine this scene where a parent who has an infant who's just begun to crawl sets them down on the floor of the wide world of the living room, and the infant begins to scoot off to go explore. And after just a few steps or scoots, what do? They'll turn back. They often will turn back and reconnect with that parent or primary caregiver to reassure themselves that they're safe. And then they turn their attention back to the living room and continue and go on to explore and expand and express themselves in that context. And if something bad were to happen, we all can imagine immediately what's going to happen. That infant's going to do whatever it takes to reconnect, to reestablish with that parent or primary caregiver the sense of safety. And so they're going to scream and cry to get either draw the attention, or maybe they'll rush back to where they know the caregiver is to, again, feel that sense of security and safety. So in this way, love equals safety. And when we feel safe, we are able to explore, expand, and express. So, as adults, while I believe it's still important for us to be surrounded by others who love us in order to let our soul shine, and of course, it's important that we are loving, we love others as a part of letting our souls shine. I want to spend a few minutes just focusing on self love, and that's because I think it's foundational. It's foundational in that we can only love others as much as we love ourselves, and we can only receive love from others to the extent we love ourselves. And so, in this way, it's essential that we practice self love in any good practice of love. So, as adults, we essentially become our own parents. I think it's tempting for us to think when we're adults, we no longer need parenting, but that hasn't been my experience personally or professionally. We still have all of the same needs that we had as a child. We need provision, we need protection, we need guidance, we need correction. And so, what actually happens is that the responsibility of those needs transitions from our parents to us. And now we become primarily responsible for ourselves. We're no longer the responsibility of anyone else. We're responsible for ourselves and meeting our needs. And while as adults, we may recruit others to help us with that, or we may outsource some of that to our partners, ultimately, it's our responsibility. So, what this means is that we have to create a loving environment in order for us to continue to explore, expand, and express who we are. We have to love ourselves to protect ourselves from vulnerability. So, how do we do this? How do we love ourselves? Well, I want to highlight three things, three ways that I think are important. The first is self-care. So, and I don't necessarily mean eating chocolate and taking bubble baths, although that may be part of it. I'm really talking about caring for those needs of protection, provision. So that might mean if eating the vegetables because we know our body needs the nutrients, or going for the walk because we know our bodies need movement, or making time to spend with friends because we know we need the social engagement. This is what I mean by self-care, is being attuned to our needs and being proactive and intentional about meeting those needs. Second strategy for practicing self-love is self-acceptance. Self-acceptance. I think it's helpful in considering this one to think about a concept that DBT, it's an approach to therapy, gives us, called radical acceptance. And by radical acceptance, what they are referring to is accepting things as it actually is. So that means, when applied to self-acceptance, it means accepting myself for who I am, who I actually am, not who I wish I was, not who I used to be, not who I think I should be. I've really come to hone in on the word should in my therapy room as a little bit of a flag, because usually where that word is, it points to some area of resistance, and resistance is not acceptance. This requires self-knowledge and understanding. And I would suggest that we do not know ourselves as well as we think we do. And I would encourage you to think about having a relationship with yourself just like you have a relationship with anyone else. When we are in relationship with someone else, we spend time, energy, effort in trying to get to know them and trying to understand them. And we need to do the same for ourselves. So if you want to level up in this area, try to be intentional about getting to know yourself and understanding yourself. You can do this through therapy, of course. It's a great forum for self-discovery, but it's not the only way. You can read self-improvement books. You can try something new. Often just putting ourselves in a new environment or trying to do something new that we haven't done before can give us really good feedback on who we are, and about ourselves. We can take personality tests, or even a personality course in psychology will challenge us to look at ourselves in a new way and understand ourselves. And lastly, that I want to mention, there's many ways, but the last one I want to mention is we can ask feedback from others, from those in our life. And I think that this is a resource that we often don't tap into because it's a bit awkward and uncomfortable. And yet has the potential to give us a wealth of information. People in our lives can act as mirrors and help us to see ourselves in a way that we don't normally see ourselves, or maybe see the parts of ourselves that we can't see, just like a mirror does. And so we can ask for feedback about ourselves. And I would just really encourage you, if you do this, to consider their feedback and not consume it, not absorb it. Hold it loosely, because other people may not be the most accurate mirrors. They may be more like funhouse mirrors and give us some sort of distorted view of ourselves. So just when you ask for feedback, consider it and hold it loosely. And obviously, the more that you get the same reflection from other people, the more confidence you can have in the accuracy of that feedback. So if I've heard over and over that I have blue eyes, then I can be more confident that, in fact, I have blue eyes. Okay, the third way that I want us to look at in practicing self-love is through self-compassion. Kristin Neff is really the guru when it comes to this topic. And so most of the information I'm going to share has come from her material. So compassion means to alleviate suffering. And in my experience, we are not great at doing this for ourselves. In fact, most of us tend to turn on ourselves and attack ourselves. We all have this inner critic that seems to live inside us that tends to bully us. And it may sound like this: you idiot, you're so stupid. You're never going to get it right. No one's ever going to love you. These types of language is how we often talk to ourselves in those moments of suffering and distress. We kick ourselves when we're down. And so obviously this is not alleviating suffering, but it's intensifying or exacerbating our suffering. So we can practice love towards ourselves through offering ourselves compassion. And Kristin Neff identifies two different ways to offer compassion. I think both are really helpful in challenging us and considering while we're trying to develop self-compassion. The first one is tender self-compassion, and the second is fierce self-compassion. Tender self-compassion harnesses the energy of nurturing in order to alleviate suffering, whereas fierce self-compassion harnesses the energy of action. Consider the mama bear who gets riled up and is ready to go to war and fight for and advocate on the behalf of their child. This is fierce self-compassion, whereas tender self-compassion is the mom at home with their child, soothing, caressing, comforting, offering, nurturing to that child. So these are the two faces of self-compassion. And I think we probably need to be intentional about developing both aspects, that we all can work and improve in both areas. However, I'm going to spend our time just a couple minutes here looking at tender self-compassion in particular. So Kristin Neff defines tender self-compassion as offering ourselves a loving, connected presence. A loving, connected presence. So this means not turning on ourselves, not abandoning ourselves, but staying present, staying connected, and offering love in spite of, right? We can do this by just shifting our self-talk from that harsh criticism to kindness, and being gentle with ourselves. And this generates feelings of connection. So we are not alone. You are not alone. You are not the only one who has done that, been in this place, felt this way. In that way, we can connect to our common humanity. Lastly, we can make room for the negative feelings that we're experiencing in that place of suffering or distress without being consumed by it. And we can do this through mindfulness. And while I don't have time to go into mindfulness, there's a lot of information out there about what that means and how to practice mindfulness. But I would just encourage you to think of it as being a witness to your suffering, observing it. We know that resistance increases suffering. So when we resist these negative feelings, we are exacerbating and intensifying the suffering or the distress that we feel. And my understanding from working with folks is that the reason we often resist tender self-compassion is because, one, we think we deserve punishment. We think we deserve these feelings of suffering. And then secondly, we think that if we go easy on ourselves, if we don't punish ourselves, that we are gonna keep on doing the same thing, or we're gonna stay in the same place. And that's just not what the research indicates. In fact, it shows that people who are more willing to offer themselves compassion are more likely to make positive change. Kristin Neff says it like this: clear acknowledgement of pain allows us to validate our feelings and take wise action to try to change things in the future. So if you want to level up in the area of self-compassion, Kristin Neff, again, is a great place to start. She has 2 books. I believe they're titled Self-Compassion and Fierce Self-Compassion. Or you can look at her website. She's got a lot of information there, selfcompassion.org. And she's got some self-compassion exercises that you can use. So she would be a great source for trying to level up in the area of self-compassion. And then the personal challenge is to commit to talking to yourself with loving kindness or gentleness. That's a great place to start. Just catch yourself in the act of bullying yourself, and stop it and replace it with a loving, connected presence by talking to yourself kindly. So putting the spotlight on SHiNE Dance Fitness. When have you felt loved at SHiNE, or when have you observed SHiNE practicing love? I'd love to read your stories and examples in the comments below. I think that SHiNE is constantly practicing love. And one of the things we'll hear often in a workout is you do you. And that's a reminder for us to accept ourselves as we are and to be who we are. They're constantly inviting us to be exactly who we are and where we are on the journey. I love that and appreciate that. In addition, they're always offering us options of how to modify or level up, creating, again, that space for us to be where we are. And I experience that as love. So our third capability, we've talked about courage, we've talked about love. Now let's talk about power. And I put power, again, following love, on purpose, because I believe that love balances power and power balances love. So we need all of these things, and they're all interconnected and interdependent. This quote from Martin Luther King Jr. really amplifies this. Power without love is reckless and abusive, while love without power is sentimental and anemic. So my proposition is this: our power comes by controlling what is ours to control and letting go of what is outside of our control. So what is power? Well, power is the ability to act or produce an effect. It's influence and action. As they say in psychology, we have agency, and an agency refers to the capacity of an individual to actively and independently choose and to affect change. So we do have choices and we are able to affect change. However, we can't change everything because everything is not in our control, or under our influence. And so this presents us with a paradox that we are often simultaneously helpless and powerful. And this is why I think it's really important for us to identify what's within our control and what's outside of our control, and to really identify our limits. We do have limits. We are not infinite. Our resources are not infinite. Some may be renewable, but they're not infinite. And so we have to contend with this fact that we are limited. And I just want to make a few comments about limits in particular, because many of us resist limits. I think we have a tendency to think of limits as a negative thing. It's not good, or it's bad to be limited. And because of this, we often ignore our limits. And it is possible for us to ignore our limits and push past our limits. There are consequences for that. And I think many times that's what we find ourselves wrestling with, a physical or health or mental health challenge because we have ignored our limits. But it is possible for us to do that for a time. So I want to really challenge us to think about limits in a new way, that there is freedom and health in limits. And you'll find this if you look at any area of life, if you talk to a financial advisor or a nutritionist, they're going to prescribe limits, that you spend less, that you eat less, because they know that there's freedom and health that comes when we operate within our limits. Limits help contain things for us. They make it more manageable. Limits bring order. And so limits can be a helpful, positive thing in our life. The other thing I want to note about limits is that they're always changing. There's a lot of variables in play that determine our limits. It can be dependent on our life stage. It can be dependent on our health, the emotional load that we're carrying, the demands and responsibilities that are placed on us. So we can quickly compare a couple of scenarios and see this pretty easily. If you're a single mom of 4 toddlers under the age of 5 versus an empty nester who's just entered retirement, your limits are going to be different. Or if you're a high-powered exec on Wall Street versus someone who's just finished college, your limits are going to be different. So they are always changing. And this also means that we can stretch our limits. We can increase our capacity. I think it was in a YouTube video that I heard Kendall talking about how if the demands and responsibilities of SHiNE were the same at the beginning of SHiNE as they are now, she wouldn't have been able to manage that. She wouldn't have been able to carry that load. However, as SHiNE has grown, she has grown alongside it. And so she has increased her capacity, and she can take on and carry more responsibility now than she could then. So we can increase our capacity. The other thing I want to quickly note, and I'm going to circle back to this a bit later on limits, is that we can limit ourselves unnecessarily. We can place artificial limits on ourselves. And so this is important for us to know too, if we are holding ourselves back in some way unnecessarily. So, okay, because we have limits, we need boundaries. Boundaries help us honor our limits by helping us protect and prioritize so we can maximize our power. Boundaries protect our energy, it protects our minds, our bodies, our hearts. It helps us prioritize our values, our goals, and how we want to use our resources. So in this way, boundaries help us concentrate our power. Consider the Wi-Fi connection that has 50 devices connected to it versus 1 or 2. The one with 50 is going to be inefficient. It's going to be inconsistent. It's going to be weak. So just like that, we can become weak and inefficient and inconsistent when too many things are draining our power. And so we need boundaries. What are boundaries? Well, I think there's a lot of really helpful and useful definitions out there to help us understand boundaries and to see different aspects of boundaries. But I wanted to keep it really basic for us here in this video. So at the most basic level, boundaries are what separate me from you, or separate what's mine from yours. It's drawing a line to help us clearly define what belongs to me and what doesn't. So think about fences. as a boundary, or borders between states or nations as boundaries that clearly identify where one starts and the other ends. So, what is mine, or what's within my control? That includes my mind, my body, and my resources. So when we look at the mind, that's my thoughts, my beliefs, my perceptions, my attitudes, my mindsets, the story that I tell myself about the world, about what's happening. So all of these things are included in my mind and fall within my control. Our bodies belong to us. Obviously, the physical body and everything that we do with it falls under our control. So this includes our actions, our reactions, our responses, our choices. And our choices often come down to our yes and our no. Your power lies in your yes and in your no. And this is why it's really important to mean yes when you say yes, and to say no when you mean no. And then the final thing that falls within my control is my resources. So that includes things like money, my social connections, my belongings and possessions, my energy, my physical, mental, and emotional energy. That's mine to control. As well as my intellect, my knowledge, my skills and talents, all of that, all of these resources, they're not limitless, but they're mine to steward. So when I acknowledge what I control, I can take ownership of that control and wield it in such a way that best serves me, my goals, and my values. When I acknowledge what I control, I can take ownership of that control and maximize my influence, energy, and impact. So what's not mine, or what's outside of my control? Well, the limits of our resources is somewhat outside of our control. And I offer a bit of a caveat because while I think it's obvious that we don't all have the same amount of resources. For example, I feel like I don't have as much physical energy as Kendall has. But we do know there's things that we can do to increase or maximize our resources. So perhaps it's helpful to consider that we have a range in which our resources live, and we can do things to push our resources towards the upper limit. However, we don't get to control what that range is, what the upper and lower limits are of our resources. So in that way, it falls outside of my control. Others fall outside of my control. I don't get to control other people's minds, bodies, or resources. I can use mine to influence, but I don't get to control it. It's outside of my control. And then lastly, outcomes. The outcomes are outside of our control. While we get to maybe control and decide the process, how we approach something, what we do, we don't get to control the outcomes. There are just too many other variables and factors in the environment that are acting on it and influence that outcome that we don't get to control the outcome. So when I acknowledge what's outside of my control, I can stop wasting time, effort, and energy. I can practice radical acceptance. So that means, again, accepting myself, others, and reality as it is, not as I wish it were, or even as it should be, but I can accept it as it is. When I acknowledge what's outside of my control, it frees me up to focus my energy, effort, and time on ways that I can influence or affect change. So all of this, distinguishing what's within our control, operating within our limits, placing effective boundaries, all of that takes time, practice, and insight that is often gained through therapy. So that's obviously one way you can level up in this area. Other ways are to consider what is in your control and what's outside of your control. Take the time to really think consciously and intentionally about that. In the same way, consider your limits. What are your actual limits? Where might you be limiting yourself unnecessarily? How are you ignoring your limits or pushing beyond your limits? And when and how can you stretch your limits to increase your capacity? So spend some time reflecting on these things and being intentional about identifying and thinking about them. So I want to take a minute to look at, to pull out one specific thing that does fall in our control to really help us here in the area of practicing our power. And that's looking at our beliefs. And the reason I wanted to pull out beliefs specifically is because they are particularly powerful. Remember, that means having the ability to produce an effect. And we know that our beliefs are able to affect and impact our environment. It's scientifically proven that what we believe matters and can evoke that into our reality. Looking at things like the self-fulfilling prophecy or the experimenter bias or the teacher bias, in which these people in what these people in positions of authority believe about others or what they expect to get from others, they often do. It often comes to pass. And so it is proven that what we believe matters. So beliefs are when we have a conviction or an opinion in something that isn't easily proven, or when we put our confidence, our faith, or trust in these convictions and opinions. And we're not 100% sure how beliefs are powerful, but our best guess is it lies in the fact that our beliefs underlie our actions. So we act out what we believe, and perhaps this evokes that outcome within our environment. So how do beliefs work? Well, beliefs help us make predictions about what's going to happen, and they help us interpret what has happened or what is happening. So we use these beliefs as filters, and it gives us information on which we act. So in this way, beliefs underlie our actions. So a few things to know about beliefs that will help you maybe begin to understand your own. Beliefs are developed early. So that means when we're really young and before we're conscious of what it is we are coming to believe. This also means that beliefs are buried deep. Because we develop them early and because our minds and bodies are designed to be efficient, we quickly, once a belief has been established, push it into the unconscious so that we are operating on autopilot. It makes us be able to effectively use our energy and resources in other ways if we push this into the unconscious. So our beliefs are buried deep. Another thing to know about beliefs is that they are learned. Beliefs are learned. We learn these beliefs by observation, by watching others. We learn by being explicitly taught to believe something. We learn by making associations. So maybe we observe two things happening simultaneously within the environment, or we associate the outcome of pleasure or pain. And in this way, we begin to develop our beliefs and learn them. And because there are anomalies in our environment, there's an element of perception and frankly, human error, we are prone to faulty beliefs. And faulty beliefs are one way that we limit ourselves. So, this is why it's important that we take the time to really bring our beliefs into our conscious awareness, identify what it is that we believe, and root out faulty beliefs so that we aren't limiting ourselves unnecessarily. And this is what I spend a lot of my time doing in therapy, is helping people dig in and understand the beliefs that are maybe the operating system running in the background of their lives. These faulty beliefs can limit our choices, or they can abdicate us of the responsibility of our choices. This is why you often will hear someone say, I can't versus I won't, or I choose not to. Or you might hear someone say, or you might find yourself saying, I have to, rather than I'd rather do this, or I'm choosing to do this in order to avoid the consequence of not doing it. So if you want to level up in this area, look for clues about your beliefs in your thoughts and in your actions. Identify your assumptions. And when you identify your assumptions and beliefs, challenge them. We know that we have a tendency to ignore or be blind to evidence in our environment that contradicts anything that we believe. So look for that. Be intentional about looking for evidence that might contradict your beliefs. Once you've identified a belief that's faulty or isn't helpful, and you want to replace it, begin to adopt a mantra or a quote or maybe a scripture that you can repeat to yourself to direct your behavior and to rewrite that belief. And this will help you develop those new beliefs in a very conscious way. And my last challenge to you is, if you want to let your soul shine, act as if you believe you have something to offer the world. So, spotlighting SHiNE Dance Fitness. I know in a workout, I often feel powerful. I get in touch with my power. So I'm curious to hear from you in the comments. Which SHiNE routines make you feel most powerful? All right, so we're on our fourth practice, purpose. In order to let your soul shine, you need purpose. And my proposition is that having a purpose gives us meaning. And if that's true, we only need to look at what brings meaning to our life in order to identify our purpose. And I believe we find our meaning in our relationships. We were made for each other. We find meaning and purpose in taking on responsibility towards others. We find meaning and purpose in striving to make the world a better place for others. So this can include our work, but it's greater than our work. David Brooks says, no one will read your resume at your funeral. When I think about my dad's funeral, this is true. We certainly mentioned his work because it was important and it mattered to him, but it wasn't what gave meaning to his life. We found meaning in hearing and telling stories about how he was always willing to lend a helping hand, always made time for you, no matter how much it might have inconvenienced him, the ways in which he made us feel special and like we mattered or were important to him. So what gave his life meaning was the relationships and the ways he took on responsibility towards those he was in relationship with. So I would encourage you, maybe a little bit of a homework assignment, carve out some time to get alone and be by yourself and consider what it is that you want said about you at your funeral. Maybe even write your obituary. And I know that sounds morbid, but I recently heard Timby Locke talking about her show, her Netflix series From Scratch. And she said, that any conversation about death is a conversation about life in disguise. And I really loved that, because I think when we consider our death, we can learn a lot about how we want to live. So I encourage you to take some time to do that. So in finding our meaning and purpose in relationships, this means we need to be building relationships and practicing community. And I think we find another paradox here that challenges us. We currently live in the most connected and most isolated era in human history. We have more ways and technologies that allow us to stay connected and be present in one another's lives than ever before. And yet, more of us than ever before are feeling disconnected and isolated and lonely. What keeps us from nurturing relationships, uh, practicing community, and taking on responsibility towards one another? Fear shows up again. The fear of vulnerability in particular, because in order to be in relationship or to be a part of a community, it requires that we show up and we be seen. So that often keeps us, that fear of vulnerability often keeps us from doing that. Maybe it's a fear of scarcity. Perhaps we don't think there's enough to go around for everyone. And so I find myself competing with you for the same resources. Or maybe I feel disempowered. I'm scared that you will control me because I can't or don't control myself, or I don't trust my ability to enforce my boundaries. And so I'm disempowered, and it keeps me from building relationships and practicing community. So, my personal challenge to you here, don't pursue a life of happiness and comfort. Pursue a life of meaning. Happiness, like all emotions, are temporary, and it's a state that comes and goes. And I would suggest it comes as a byproduct of living a meaningful life. My other challenge is to focus on the quality of your relationships. Science seems to suggest that the quality matters. So fight for it, fight for high quality relationships. Research suggests that we live longer with healthier bodies and minds when we're in higher quality relationships. Again, put the spotlight on SHiNE Dance Fitness and think about how SHiNE cultivates relationships. And I think they're really intentional about this. I love that they declare we are stronger together, because I think it's true, and it communicates the importance and value of relationships within this community. If you are a part of the SHiNE online community, you're probably familiar with Erin Jacobs, who is intentionally and actively creating opportunities to build relationships and build the community by weekly questions on our Facebook group page, or facilitating monthly connection calls. They are proactively trying to establish and cultivate relationship, as well as taking responsibility towards the community that they have built. So I believe that they practice purpose. I'd love to hear in the comments from you how you see SHiNE cultivating relationships, or maybe how they have communicated to you that you mean something to them. Our final practice, joy. In order to let your soul shine, you need joy. And my proposition is that joy is not in our circumstances, it's a choice. And if this is true, we can cultivate and create our own joy. So I want to give you 5 strategies for how you can produce more joy in your life. The first one is to practice gratitude. practice gratitude. And there is a lot of information available about what this means and how to go about this, and even the benefits of practicing gratitude. The research indicates that when we practice gratitude, it's good for our mental health and our bodies too. Seems to reduce toxic emotions like regret, frustration, envy, and resentment. It reduces depression while increasing happiness. It improves our self-esteem. We feel better about ourselves. It reduces stress, increases our resilience, improves our sleep, which we've already talked about the importance of. We experience fewer aches and pains in our body, and it increases opportunity for new social connections. So it circles back to building relationships. It helps us create new opportunities to connect and build those relationships. The second strategy for cultivating and creating joy in your life: discover delight. Delight means to experience great pleasure. So pay attention to what brings you delight, what brings you great pleasure. And I think this is often what we refer to when we say it's the little things, because we find delight in the little things throughout our lives and our days. So pay attention to those things. I would love to hear, because I think SHiNE is a source of delight. I'd love to hear the ways that SHiNE delights you in the comments. The third strategy is closely connected to this discovering delight, and it's savoring pleasure. So once you have discovered what brings you pleasure, lean into it and savor the experience of that pleasure. So what does it mean to savor? Well, imagine savoring a delicious meal or dessert, and what you're doing in that moment. You're focusing your attention and all your senses on that experience of pleasure. You're paying attention to the sights, the smell, the taste, the texture, and maybe even the sounds. And that's what it means to savor pleasure. The fourth strategy for cultivating and creating joy in your life: adopt a mindset of play. While we all, I think, inherently know that play is important and valuable in a child's life, we tend to discount this once we become an adult. And this has led to a play deficit among adults. But play is a valuable and important part of the adult life. So what is play? What does it mean to play as an adult? Well, to play is engaging in any activity for enjoyment or recreation. Stuart Brown, who's an expert in play, gives us 5 properties of play. So to help us identify when an activity is play, we can look at these 5 properties. The first one is that the activity is apparently purposeless. It has no purpose or function. So this first property immediately knocks SHiNE Dance Fitness out as being considered play, because most of us are engaging in that activity to improve or maintain our physical and mental health. So there is a purpose to SHiNE Dance Fitness. However, I would suggest that they incorporate a lot of playful elements in their workouts. We certainly do not need to play air guitar or smack our booties in order to get the physical and mental health benefits of a SHiNE workout. These are just playful elements that they add into their workout, and they're really important and effective, because every time that we think this is fun in a workout, we are going to release dopamine into our system, and that is going to make it more likely that we're going to engage in this behavior again. And so these playful elements are really effective and helpful in promoting physical exercise. And as I continue to look at Stuart Brown's 5 properties, I want you to notice how many of these SHiNE does kind of tick off those boxes for you. So the first one I already mentioned was that the activity is apparently purposeless. The second property is that there's an inherent attraction to the activity. When it's play, we are inherently attracted to it. It gives us a freedom from time. We kind of lose track of time or all sense of time when we're engaged in a playful activity. Likewise, it diminishes our consciousness of self. So we get a freedom from ourselves, which is such a gift. And the fifth property is that we want to do more of it. When it's play, we want to do it again and again. So what are the benefits of adopting a playful mindset as an adult? Well, the research indicates that without play, when we don't incorporate play in our lives, our long-term quality of life is compromised. Play is associated with increases in mood, in optimism, increases in the capacity for pleasure. So it helps us savor our delights. It increases self-discovery. So again, you see how these are interwoven. Play helps us in terms of our self-understanding and our ability to love ourselves because we can know ourselves better through play. It gives us new ways of being. And again, I see this directly connected to a SHiNE workout because there are identities and parts of myself that I haven't used or developed in my everyday life that I can play around with in a SHiNE workout. I get to pretend and play with being sexy, being graceful, being fierce, being sassy, being gritty. And these are ways of being that I may discover and begin to pull over and incorporate into other areas of my life. So we know that play can give us new ways of being. Play inoculates against rigidity. And we all know that flexibility is really important and essential in preventing us from physical injury. And I would suggest it's also important in preventing psychological injury. Play increases brain growth. It increases social cohesion, so it brings us together and we bond. And it helps us attune to our relationships. We're more relationally attuned with play in our life. And for those of you in long-term relationships, whether that's with your partner or even with friends, play helps us sustain emotional intimacy in those longer-term relationships. Adopt a mindset of play. So our fifth strategy for cultivating and creating joy is seek out awe. Look for and create opportunities for you to be filled with awe. And awe is a sense of overwhelm and appreciation at the magic and mystery of the greatness of something or someone else. So it's in admiring something other than ourselves, something that is greater than ourselves. So we often feel awe in nature or when looking at a piece of art or during a spiritual experience. What are some times that you have been filled with awe? Share them in the comments. There's a lot of benefits indicated by the research when we have that experience of awe. It increases cooperation. It increases the chance or the likelihood that we're going to share our resources with each other or that we're going to sacrifice for others. It helps us to see ourselves more accurately, and it evokes humility. Brene Brown says in her book, Atlas of the Heart, that experience of awe may be one of the fastest and most powerful methods of personal change. She says, when feeling awe, we tend to simply stand back and observe, to provide a stage for the phenomenon to shine. So let's remember that to shine means to recognize the light in others, to stand back and give them a stage to shine. And again, I think we see this being practiced in the SHiNE community. Kendall recognizes the light in others, and rather than being threatened by it, she generously gives her stage to them and allows them to shine. And it's for the good of all of us, it's for the benefit of our community. So, my personal challenge is for you to be intentional and look for the light in those around you and care for it like a flame or a spark. Celebrate it, make a stage for it, and let it shine. Thank you very much for taking this time with me, listening to my thoughts and my perspective as a therapist on what it means and how we can let our soul shine. I hope that something that I've said here will be useful, that you can take it and apply it to your life and to live more fully and genuinely and authentically as yourself. If you have any questions, comments, or need to get in contact with me for any reason, you should be able to find my website in the description. I'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you for listening, and keep shining.